Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome to episode 1 of Foreplay, Getting Creative, with your host, Hugh MacDonald. Today we will be chatting to Luke Fulton, an actor based in Glasgow and personal friend of mine. Luke has recently graduated college and been fortunate enough to be represented by Black Box Artist Management. We will be discussing all about Foreplay Creative's recent project, An Endless Rabbit Hole. We get into conversation about what it's like to be an actor in these trying times, to find out what keeps us creative throughout all of this. We also discuss the writing and performing process of An Endless Rabbit Hole, and how we adapted and changed the piece from its original conception. So, make sure you're nice and comfy, pull up the sheets, get all cozy, because we are about to begin. Okay, so Luke Fulton.
Hello there, Hugh.
How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, and I'm happy to be here in my parents' bedroom with my ring light on.
Nice.
Talking to the big man himself.
Thank you. Well, I think that's everyone's story right now. Is there self-tapes in their parents' bedroom? It's kind of weird,
Yeah.
but it's kind of fine as well.
Yeah, it's kind of fine, but we've got to make it work because it's just the way things are right now. You know, you've got to make these things work. You've got to get yourself set up with the means of auditioning and finding work and creating work for yourself, by yourself, because the industry right now is completely kaput. Yeah. So I think that obviously brings us on to a very good topic, and it is, why are we here and what are we doing today?
That's a very good question. So, we are Foreplay Creative, as you can tell by you obviously being listening to this podcast, but we have released An Endless Rabbit Hole, and you've probably watched it and you're like, it's very interesting. I want to see the people behind this, minus a couple of people obviously, but you know, COVID restrictions, LOL. So I guess what I want to do is actually want to start with yourself, Luke. I want to talk a little bit about you, about why you wanted to be an actor, and you know, how you found it, obviously during all this kind of time. You know, how's it been for you? So I'm going to leave it.
Well, I mean, if there's one thing that I do love talking about, it is myself. Right. Well, I'm Luke Fulton. I am based out of Glasgow, Cambuslang specifically. I'm represented by Black Box Artist Management, and I recently graduated my HND in acting and performance. Now, I did pick the worst year in history for anyone to ever graduate acting. But here we are, and we're making it work. And to be honest, I feel very thankful and very lucky that I've managed to get representation this year. It was a big favour from a mate of mine, and I was just very lucky to get it. It's obviously been, even though representation, it does not mean that I am out here acting every single day, because the work has ground to a halt. And I think it's under these restrictions, you know, the industry can't really bear to catch up. So I think in times like this, it's obviously very important for us to find work where you can and not put too much pressure on yourself to be finding that work, because it's a fairly dry spot right now. And, you know, there's actors, you know, Oscar-winning actors that are out of work actors right now. You know what I mean? But for me, I would say, why is a big question. Why have I decided to do this to myself? And I think it is quite simply, must have started when I was young. I would have a different career I wanted every single week. And in real life, you can't really do that. You can't be, you know, a soldier one week, a chef the next. You can't chop and change all those things. So I used to love the idea of fully exploring all these options and still being able to return to baseline. It basically allowed me to play at doing everything for as long as possible, because that's basically what acting is. It's just, you've not really outgrown that phase of wanting to play. And obviously, I think that's where that creative work comes from. I think for myself, as you get older and you obviously, the process of that matures, your reasons become bigger and deeper. For me, for instance, I really love the psychological side behind acting. I think acting's something that is so important because it prepares you for life like nothing else does, because it is a study of people and what people do and why they do the things they do, and like, how do people react to gargantuan situations. And I think it like helps you understand psychology, philosophy, morals and ethics. It covers a whole base. I think as well with it, with acting, I've always had a side of like performativeness. It started before acting. I was really into stand-up. I was really into improv. I was really into comedy, and I like to have that relationship to a crowd. Have that relationship of building an atmosphere. And also as well, I do really like the sound of my own voice, and I do love to just talk away. So there is that.
Well, I think to be any type of artist or anything, you've really got to like your own voice.
Yes.
I think it's really important that you've got to. I think like you say, with the performance and that sort of thing. I think there's an honesty in trying to find yourself within those pieces. I think, and
Yeah.
there's a real excitement. I think when you're trying to you're just trying to figure it out. It's
Mm.
you're sitting there and you go, have I ever actually experienced anything like this in my life
Yeah.
before? And maybe you're playing a serial killer, and it's fair enough, you probably haven't, but
Yeah.
such is life. um so I do get what you mean, though, trying to find that career path and maybe saying, well, cool, I don't actually know what I want to do.
Yeah.
um
So why don't you?
so why don't you just be everything? It's
Yeah.
kind of jack of all trades. But no, I absolutely I really get that, and I think that's why you're here and that's why I'm here. Is we both have creative visions, and there's things that we want to do and want to put forward. And I definitely think with COVID going on, I don't think that's a reason to
Yeah.
stop everything. Kind of when we kind of talk about shooting later on, we've always had to kind of look at our restrictions and what we could do and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So it's
And adapt accordingly.
yeah. So like it's not something that should stop. I think there's a lot of people that are maybe negative Nellies about it. And they're going, you know what, enough's enough. Like, when can I go back to the theater? But instead of saying when can I go back to the theater, it's like, what can I do today?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's one of the big reasons that I started kind of foreplay creative was we had a script from last year that we were trying to use. We were actually trying to do a
Yeah.
theatrical show, and for better or for worse, obviously that's been paused. But actually, I think we've created something that's a wee bit
Yeah.
more,
Something bigger.
yeah, something that's got more of a wider grasp. And I think that's what's really good about
Yeah.
this opportunity is we can
Yeah.
we can do these podcasts, we can do we can do the filming, even if we need to do
Mhm.
at home sessions, we can do.
Yeah. And I think it's a much more sustainable process as well. I think what we had in mind initially was for one big crescendo, and what we did after that was completely in the air. But I think this is a really self-sustaining vision at the moment,
Yeah.
and what we're doing is sustainable and can be done for a long time, and leaves us lots of options and lots of places to explore and to take things and try things out and be more experimental because of how fluid the work itself actually is.
Well, I think that's important. That it is self-sustaining. I think there's a lot of opportunities where you could say, right, I'm just going to wait for this to come to me, and you can see what kind of
Yeah.
happens. But waiting for it isn't realistic, I don't think. And
Yeah.
really important is there's a platform there now
Yeah.
for artists. Maybe they've got a
Yeah.
skill they've not really practiced in a long time. And it's really easy just to go, right, cool, we're just going to set this up and see what happens. I mean, the way we filmed our piece was just really what we had, and that was it. And
Yeah.
it might come down, a year down the line, and we've got proper equipment and stuff, and I hope we do. And it just kind of keeps progressing from here. But it's just one of these things. I mean, when we kind of think about the actual process of doing this first original one, it actually started from a piece I'd written with Scottish Youth Theatre,
Yes.
which was all about the lockdown, funnily enough. And what was really interesting about that was it's kind of writing a piece about like a time and place of your life, but you're also trying to figure out, right, I don't want to make this about a lockdown piece, even though it is a lockdown piece, because
Yeah.
realistically what you'd end up doing there is you'd have a piece that isn't timeless.
It's dated.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's exactly.
it becomes a historical artifact.
Yeah, and once these things become oversaturated, because I do believe as time goes on and after all this is over, there's going to be a saturation in the industry, in creative works, and everything is going to be lockdown, COVID related. You know, it's like if you look at the Fringe every year, it's basically a sum of events from the year before. And I think that can often happen in the industry that, you know, like we'll be playing like catch up on COVID for years to come. I think all this work will be inspired by it and be relevant to it. And I think it's better to be inspired but create timeless work that stands on its own. You know, I think a lot of the themes that I've touched on this are COVID relevant, but not COVID specific. I think everything that's explored in this piece is fully standing on its own.
Well, yeah, I think it's, you kind of get into a point where you go, right, so I've got a piece to write about COVID, but I don't want to write a piece about COVID. So what you've got there is then, right, so how do I make this a universal experience that probably everyone's felt at
Yeah,
some point, but keeping it within a character context and keeping it in a context, that we can deal with and actually use as a piece. So I thought, right, let's do kind of a bit of a meta piece where, it's the actor that's the one that's in
yeah,
despair, the one that's kind of lost. Um, and I don't necessarily think uh, the idea of the actor was originally was going to be a wee bit older. He's already had like the highlights of his career, and then
yeah,
everything's halted to a stop. He's starting to kind of see that he's hit his peak, and now he's no longer the alpha of the acting market.
yeah. He's
But
he's not rapidly increasing year to year. He's kind of beginning to stagnate.
yeah, and what he's actually found is lost, what he built up, and I think he's just living on those kind of. It's like a lot of people do, is they live on the highs of their life and then they kind of get
Yeah,
on with it. Um, but when I came to rewrite and kind of reimagine the piece for our context, it
yeah,
became more about a person that was already in their career or starting their career or whatever.
yeah,
And I think that's is a really universal experience. It doesn't have to be an actor where you can get caught out in your career.
yeah,
It can happen to anyone. It can happen to a chef. It can happen to an
yeah.
engineer.
I think
And if
especially creatives as well. I think obviously a big thing about this piece is a lot of it. I think has got to do with someone kind of losing who they are from losing their purpose. And I think when you're a creative, there's this very kind of lonely and sad matter of fact, and it's a matter of fact that you do have to accept. And what that is when you're on your high, everyone is with you, and when you're in your low point, you're by yourself. And it's very much like you'll know it yourself. Like any creative, like if a singer doesn't get a gig, or like actor doesn't get an audition for a few months, etc. It starts to go. It's their family, their friends. They start to look and go, well, you've given it a go.
yeah,
You know, that job in Tesco is looking a bit tempting, isn't it now?
it's like here's a way
And it's
to
people,
earn money. Yeah, it is. It's
yeah, and people start to kind of give up. But when you're doing well, when you've got the gigs, when you've got the auditions, when you've got the part, you've got all these friends, you've got all these people supporting you. We knew you could do it. We know you're going to make these career gains and goals. And as soon as you go that little gap of work, it's that the doubt of everyone else sets in and compiles upon you, I think. And I think that is more relevant than ever to this year, because every creative has been hit with this lockdown. And because they have been hit, everyone's having that chat right now. Everyone's having to stave off that lack of belief and try and hold in that they've got the belief in themselves, and for that to be enough.
Yeah, I think this is a real time, to show a bit of versatility, and to actually kind of show, what you've got.
Yeah,
Whether that be, your self-taping for the thousandth time or whatever, you're still pushing for that dream. And I think it's really easy to kind of alienate yourself from the dream, and actually you need to. I mean, I think everyone at some point in this lockdown has went, is this really what I want to do in my life, or
yeah,
is is there something else? But even when people, I've found myself, learning new hobbies, that sort of thing. Even during all this time, you go, nah, I'm actually quite happy and kind of where I am. But
yeah,
there's no reason I shouldn't want to change my own skill set and actually improve
yeah,
what I have. And this is one of the reasons that I kind of started writing, was actually I think like a lot of actors, there's a freedom in being able to write. You get kind of get lost in
yeah,
it, and that was something that was really important when I was writing this piece. Is I wanted to kind of have it so that you can kind of get lost in it a little bit as a performer.
yeah,
I think I've got a bit more of a benefit of being an actor, a trained actor as well, and
yeah,
you can actually write for performers, and you can kind of go, right, I think I know where they might want to go with this, and that sort of thing. And it's only until you start actually seeing it performed is when you start to go, right, it's connecting the dots of actually that worked really well,
yeah.
and then this didn't work so well. And
Mm-hmm.
Scottish Youth Theatre piece that we wrote I wrote was a lot longer.
Yeah,
And that was one of the big things, was like I felt it was maybe a bit too monotonous at the start.
mm,
So when that's the good thing about seeing it performed for the first time, is then you can come back and you can adapt it.
yeah.
And
Well, I think talking about like the first performance of it was very relevant as to why I'm here.
yep,
I think it was obviously, I know you're saying in that kind of, it was a lot more long-winded in structure. But what I found specifically with the actor performing it was very good, and I think they spotted a lot of good things within the character. Obviously, the character is very narcissistic, has a big ego, self-aggrandizing, and I think that they just kind of stopped there,
yep,
and they just left it at that. And I was like, I thought it was kind of ironic as an actor that they couldn't see um, the fact that there's something incredibly sad about this character.
yep,
There's something incredibly sympathetic, and it's the fact that he has lost his purpose. Like, it doesn't matter how big of an ego for himself that he's got. He completely identifies as an actor.
yep,
It's who he is. He breathes it, and from circumstances that are not in that person's control, they have lost that purpose, and now they don't know who they are, and they're going through that process of all the friends, family, fans. It all dries up,
yep,
and they're truly alone, and they're angry about it. And I think it's very easy to take that anger as whining,
yeah,
or as as a very moany kind of just cocky self righteousness about the COVID situation. But I would say that there's something very sad in the fact that this person, underneath all that, has lost who they are.
yeah.
And they're angry about it, and they are devastated. I think that was something that I thought that maybe wasn't touched upon when I saw it performed for the first time.
Well, I think that is a really big thing. I think the character itself can seem as very self-loathing. Kind of really loves himself. That's all they care about. But there is a bigger picture. And I think that's what we've actually managed to capture. In this piece,
Yeah,
we've had a little bit more opportunity to kind of play with it. I think having seen it the first time with a different actor.
yeah,
The thing about that piece was it wasn't really in our control. Um,
mm,
piece was written for them, and it was given to them, and
yeah,
self-directed, that sort of thing, and that's fair enough. I'm not going to hold it against anyone. I actually thought it was good. However, there was maybe something in it that I saw that wasn't 100% conveyed, and I think you agreed with that, and I think that's
yeah,
why we kind of came together and went, let's do this the way we want to do it. And I
yeah,
think I think what we ended up with was a really incredible piece. Actually, I think there's some really good stuff in it.
Yeah,
Forgoing all our kind of issues in terms of technical ability and things with cameras, that sort of
yeah,
thing. I think what we still came away with was an interesting piece, and I think
yeah.
there's a lot in there that we can look at. The ending will always be the best bit for me, but that
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think that's because that was the one that we had to work for a little bit harder than the rest of them.
Oh yeah, that was hard work. That
Yeah,
shoot was a very difficult shoot, especially that part.
yeah. If you haven't seen the piece yet, I would definitely go and click on it and have a little watch at it and actually watch the ending. We basically set up at Queen's Park, and they've also going to got their little outdoor theatre section, and we were like, this is going to be the great finale.
Yeah,
And it was really just the piece that I had in my head. I was like, this is definitely what I want to
yeah,
use as
yeah. This place is where the crescendo happens of the
yeah.
piece. You know.
I think what was really important about that part was, you start to see the flip of that character where he goes from being that quite narcissistic person to actually, all he's got is what's in front of him,
Mhm.
which is obviously the audience. But as it kind of builds and it starts to create and starts to formulate, what you actually see there is nothing. Um,
Yeah,
and what I think's interesting about that is, it is kind of COVID relevant. People
yeah,
can't go and see things, but I think what is there as well though is a dedication. Even if there is nothing, there's still a push
yeah.
and a stride to want to perform.
Well, I think that's the thing, is that he kind of in that process finds the fact that he identifies with this, he needs this, and yes, it's lovely to have an audience. Yes, it's lovely to have work, but first and foremost, you should pursue that passion for yourself and by yourself. And if you're performing to an empty crowd, so be it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the process should be bigger than the outcome for you.
Yeah,
I think that's how you make success of anything. Is if
yeah.
you love the process, the outcome really shouldn't matter.
Yeah, I think that's what's really important about being a performer as well. No matter what's in front of you, you should be able to perform to your best abilities. And I mean, the best experience I've ever had with that was I was asked to play at a wedding as just in reception, and what you've got there is kind of a weird scenario where nobody's really listening to you. You're just background music, but you're still playing live. So you've kind of got like this weird balance of should I really go all out because people aren't listening, so everything's wasted, or should I go all out because I want to play and I want to use that time there to even develop? I think what you learn as a performer, even when you're doing live stuff or where people maybe aren't interested or there's not not that much of a crowd or whatever, is resilience. You learn, just push it, and that hopes
Yeah,
that one day that by you pushing yourself every stage of the process, by the time that you get that full crowd, you're on fire basically.
yeah, yeah. You've if you practice at 100%, when the time comes to give 100%, it's going to come easy to you.
You're ready, yeah, absolutely. You're up here, whereas maybe people that
Yeah,
aren't as ready for it, or maybe just starting to trying to get up to you. By the time you've done maybe a 6-7 night show run, whatever, you're finally
yeah,
starting to get on levels. Um,
yeah.
but
Whereas you want to land first night,
Yeah,
you know.
100%. I think everyone has that thing of I want to be there 100% the first time. I want to make sure it's perfect.
Yeah,
Um, for better or for worse, I mean, us filming it was very strange because obviously we have our elephant in the room, which was COVID, and I think
yeah,
it's just making sure that we were following the rules and we're making sure we could do something that was we could do some like smart targets. It's something that we could realistically actually do.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
And I think it's great actually being outdoors. It gives it a different atmosphere. I think from the kind of the original one. I think I always saw it kind of as an outdoors piece. That kind of searching. When you go outdoors for a
Mhm.
walk, you maybe try to search for an answer, or you're just lost in
Yeah,
your own
yeah.
head.
I think it was therapeutic for the character in the sense that in the worst times of your life, some of the best things to do is to take a walk in the park.
Yeah,
And I think when he's exploring himself, exploring what he wants. It's also that kind of location change in the park, and it's very much a therapeutic process of clearing your head. So I think it was really good for the park, and also especially the ending shot, the crescendo in the bandstand was really relevant to the piece.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think what was interesting was obviously the way that we decided to do the other 2/3 of it. I think that was the one that we hadn't planned as much. But I think I quite like the idea of the way the character isn't really planning what's going on, during the walk.
Yeah.
That's what I really wanted to capture. And I know we spent like a day like actually going through it and going, right, where do we
Yeah.
use and that sort of thing. But I think we actually kind of formulated a great route anyway. By the time
Yeah.
we finished, by the time we got to that theatre at the end, we actually kind of figured out, yeah, this is definitely where we want to go. And um, for kind of directorial choices are kind of strange. I mean, cinematography in this one's a bit different. It is a bit kind of confused. It is that sort of thing, but it's
Yeah.
relevant to the character.
Yeah, and it switches a lot of styles, obviously, within
Yeah.
the recordings, because obviously the technical aspect of using the two different cameras,
Yeah.
For the B-roll and obviously,
Yeah.
the main piece. What I would say is the shoot itself was definitely a hard one, even out with all these restrictions. I think the day itself,
Yeah.
coincidentally, COVID or not, would have been a very hard one. Initially, obviously, because the weather for it is dreadful. If you look at the piece, you can
Oh
see
yeah.
that my hair is plastered to my forehead with rain.
Yeah.
It will absolutely soaked, every one of us.
Yeah. I think what was
Um,
funny about the way that we did that though is because we recorded it back to front. It's very
yeah,
there is an interesting continuity that we went for, and I guess we could say it was planned, but let's just put our hands up and say it wasn't planned. But actually, what we came away with is, as the mind clears, the character becomes drier, and
yeah,
that was probably one of the best accidents I think we could have made that day. Was
yeah.
doing it the
Yes, I
wrong way
do.
around. Um, to be fair, Ewan wasn't very happy with it, our assistant director, but so because we filmed all the monologue parts backwards, and then we filmed all the B-roll the right way around. So we basically had to
yeah,
do a lap one way and then a lap back the way, and it was a long shoot.
yeah,
But I think there's a lot to kind of capture, and the strange camera angles. It's a little bit
yeah.
drafty.
I think the way we done it as well was just like, I think it was more conducive to what we wanted.
Yeah, I think it more plays towards the piece. It's not meant to be clearly thought out. It's not a duologue. Where you can really develop those camera angles and really play with, character relations with it. I think what you've got is the, basically two people, the camera and the actor.
Yeah,
And that's what the original piece was originally written as. Was the camera as a person that they're talking to. And they did actually actively use it in the original piece, but because we adapted
yeah,
it slightly and I've changed it, was I wanted to try and keep it fresh, and it was more. It felt like there's parts that maybe kind of feel like a news report or something like that, and I think, especially the beginning's quite interesting because we used the bench in the red.
yeah,
We got a really weird and quirky angle.
yeah. I really like the opening shot.
Yeah,
Something I'm very fond of.
yeah. Whether that be having to kneel down on a tree stump in the soaking rain, that's another question. But
And surprisingly, it was actually one of the easier shots that we got.
yeah, it was probably one of the best looking, and I think one of the easiest ones. A close that was kind
Yeah,
of a close cut, and I was actually having to edit the zoom while you were doing it on my watch, on the fly. As I was kind of
yeah,
watching it through the viewfinder, and I mean that's the thing. Like, I think there's some people that maybe disagree with using phones as a matter of recording it, but actually I think what we achieved on the day with it was decent.
yeah,
I think there's no denying it. Like the second piece, this is our first piece, so I think it's really important, that we gain that experience of what to do and what not to do. And I definitely think,
yeah.
I think especially with everything that's going on, I definitely think phones have a place in terms of recording
I think,
material.
well, yeah. If you talk about the technological standpoint, the phones the level of the cameras on them have improved. It's
Yep.
not exactly what it was maybe 5 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
So it's much more relevant
Yeah.
and much more um, useful
Yeah.
now to get phones involved and
Well, I
to
think.
utilize, because it's fairly cheap, and I think it's good if you're someone that's starting out, launching something new, and you obviously need to save those incurring costs.
Yeah.
If you have that level of camera on, like, you know, an iPhone 11 or whatever, don't go your way to buy, you know, the brand new Canon or whatever. You have got a really good camera, and I think it's much better to hit the ground running
Yeah.
and get your work out there and express it whilst it's fresh,
Yeah.
than feel like you need to haul all this money into your production and make it what you want to be. You know, that should be your end result. I
Yeah.
think start now and aim to get there.
Well, I think our biggest expense that morning was a breakfast. Go
Yep.
figure. Um, but you know, I think like the whole camera thing was actually like, it achieved 90% of all the shots that we wanted. The rest of it
Yeah.
was done on an 8mm film camera. But actually, I think the ending, like the whole kind of the montage piece of you kind of performing out in that stage was really interesting because we got the slow mo that we
Hmm.
wanted. There was a vision in my head is that this definitely has to be kind of be in that nice slow motion and it has to be quite emotive, and we got that. And I think that's really important. Is you can do it. So whether or not people agree or disagree, it doesn't really make a difference. I think if you're creating pieces,
Yeah.
and I think if you're being really honest with what you've got, you can create some really good stuff. I mean, the music that we used really helped as well.
Yeah.
Alice Faye Neal, that was a really interesting piece, and I think it just really suited what we were looking for.
Yeah.
Um,
It completely covered, from like a character point, from what the themes that we were covering. It, it was very relevant, I think, in composition and also obviously lyrics as
yeah.
well.
Um, very glad that we could get to use that piece because it was in my head for a long time. It was like this is probably one of the best pieces that we could use for this. No matter
Yeah.
what we're kind of thinking of, I quite like the interesting music writing of it. It is an interesting style. Alice's voice is really great in it actually. So when you get to that big crescendo, you get to hear it in full pelt.
Yeah.
Um, it was really great
I
that we
think
got.
a crescendo really,
Yeah, definitely.
as the music choice.
It's the music choice I think was really important in
The
this.
pacing, yeah, the pacing in the music choice is really good as well for the piece.
And it's like you've kind of the piano piece itself. It kind of lends itself to the way that we're still recording it as well. It's quite funky and kind of like it's not funky in the sense of the genre, but kind of funky in maybe that it's not quite 100% like like a pop track or whatever. So it kind of suits the way we're filming it with the two cameras. The odd styles, and it really balanced and blended the whole piece, I think, and it gave it a different energy. When we were trying to edit it, one of my big
Yeah,
things was, all the cuts seemed really strange and a bit janky and a bit weird. And as soon as we put that instrumental on top of it, it just finished it.
yeah,
And it was like, yep, we've actually got something we can work with. Because looming in my head is like, oh dear, something's definitely not right. This isn't going to work. We're going to have to reshoot it or whatever. But actually,
yeah,
luckily within our time frame we were able to do it, and it was just a really really good experience for the first time. Obviously now our
yeah,
scenarios have changed a little bit, so the way we will be doing it is going to be slightly different, but that is just conducive of what we're dealing with. And what we
yeah,
don't what I think we've still got some great pieces coming out, and I think what we don't want to do is lose the quality of the meaning of the text and things. I think cameras can, like, where you shoot it can be quite secondary. I think uh, I think our next piece is definitely written in a way that it can be 100% adapted to whatever
yeah, yeah.
actor.
I think they're highly adaptable piece, to begin with as well.
Yeah,
I think the writing process and how it's done, because I feel like we've dealt more with concepts and more with the human side of everything.
yeah,
That location doesn't really matter as long as you can see emotional journey behind that, you
Yeah.
know?
100%, and I think that's what's really important, is the pieces that we do are very human, and it keeps us a bit more versatile, I think, in terms of casting things. You know, you're not shoehorned into doing it one way or another. It is a very universal opportunity for everyone. So um, the casting with this one was slightly different, I think, because we'd agreed, you know, this is definitely the way we want to do it.
Yeah.
So it's just really nice, and it all kind of fit into place. And we had, you know, Ewan helping out and assisting us. But it'll be nice, you know, once we get to this month's piece,
Yeah.
to kind of
Once
see.
we actually, because this is actually an opportunity. Obviously, I'm coming in with the establishing piece.
Yeah.
But it obviously me an opportunity to step back and getting into a more creative assisting role, rather than just have it be it's Luke returning to act every month. And I think obviously I would love to be involved in an acting role again. Of course I would, but I think it's good to establish that Foreplay Creative is a platform for any performer,
Yeah.
and as long you know we've got the suitable piece for you, and you know you're willing to come in with that effort. You know, I think it gives a really great platform for creative people.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think that's really important that we note that, is, you know, that every month a new piece will come out, and it won't be the same team that are always on it.
Yeah, and roles will change. Roles
Yeah.
will change. You know, it won't necessarily. You know, the writing split might not be the same. You know, the actors can change. If someone wants to take a step back from a directorial role, that's on the table too. It's completely fluid in that regard, and it's just to keep it fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. You know, if you're listening to this podcast and you finally got to the end of this and you go, wow, this is not interesting at all, or this is actually, you know, there's something in this that I might be interested in getting involved in, then, you know,
Yeah,
we are very open and we are ready to take anyone from any experience. You know, even if you have maybe no acting experience or no directing experience or whatever, we're more than happy, you know, to say, right, if we can find a piece that we can work with, if
yeah,
all our COVID restrictions, you know, make sense, then we can do something, definitely. You know, I think that's really important to note, is, but it's an open door. This platform is an open door.
yeah, yeah,
We want to make great pieces with talented people. It doesn't. You
yeah.
don't have to be an actor. You know, if maybe you're a musician, you've got a really good track you want to share forward, then
Yeah.
we'd happily use it.
It's about giving people that platform and outlet. Most importantly, it gives people. I think it's very relevant. The first piece that we have chosen to use is basically we're giving everyone their bandstand, as per se.
What we've essentially done with our first piece is kind of started a warming up act.
Yeah,
And, you know, we're only going to progress from here. Obviously, this month, you know, our new piece is going to be slightly different. It's going to be, you know, at home session. So we're trying to, you know, we've got some stuff in, but we've got a little telltale sign, you know, for February's kind of podcast, or March's podcast actually now.
we'll see. Yeah,
So, you know, episode 2 of the podcast, I think we've definitely got some. We'll kind of discuss the way that we had to adapt and film the new piece. So, but like we say, we'll not take up too much more time. Luke, is there anything
yeah.
else that you kind of want to say at all, you know, before we wrap things up?
Before we wrap things up, I think it was a pleasure to work on. I would really encourage everyone, if you haven't checked it out, to give it a wee look, to give Foreplay Creative a follow, not just for our sake or my sake, but potentially yours, because it is this open platform. It was very enjoyable working with it. It was very enjoyable having that input and being creative with it. And I would encourage everyone, if they ever get the opportunity to be involved, to jump with it and take that leap, you know.
Yeah. Oh, Where are we? Thank you very much for saying all that, Luke. It's definitely been great to have a wee chat. You have you on, and we'll look forward to the next one. Thank you. Well, and that'll be us.